Hey everyone, welcome to this video. Today I'm doing a review of my Fujifilm X T4. This camera is really special to me because it broke a habit where I was jumping from brand to brand, model to model. When I got this camera, I finally stuck with one model and one brand, and I've had it for the last 4 years. To give you a bit of context, I mainly shoot street, travel, documentary type photography, and I use the camera to make YouTube videos and reels. And yeah, let's not wait any longer and let's get on with this review. So we'll start with the basics. This is a mirrorless camera. It's a crop sensor, so it's an APS-C sensor. It's got 26.1 megapixels and it comes with the X-Trans4 CMOS sensor inside. I'll give you a quick look if you like. So there we are. Now, one of the big draw cards to this camera was the video capabilities. It can shoot 4K 60p at 420 10-bit internal, which was really important for me because I had come off a camera that was only 8-bit, and I really noticed the difference in the color grading where you could push the colors 8-bit versus 10. So that was like a major deciding factor in getting this. And in 1080 it can do 240p. It's also got F-log assist, which means when you're shooting in log, the camera will put it into Rec 709 so that you're seeing an actual colored picture rather than a washed out image, which is really handy when you're filming, and it also helps you sort of gauge your exposure and color. So moving on to the shutter, another impressive feature, it can do continuous 15 frames a second on the mechanical shutter, which is quite fast for a camera of that era. And the shutter sounds great. I'll just pop the camera into the shutter mode, the fast shutter mode, so you can have a look. So this is what it sounds like at 15 frames a second. I just love that sound. It's so cool. It's got a really, really nice shutter sound, this camera, the best I've ever heard yet. Moving on to image stabilization, it's got 5-axis image stabilization. It comes, of course, with Wi-Fi and Bluetooth ahead of its time. It also has dual card slots. Let me just show you those. Just put my finger on there because there's a serial number on there. But yeah, you've got the 2 cards, SD, and I've got fast cards in there, but you can use, there's a selection of different ones you can use. In terms of AF, it's got 425 phase detection points. I've not had too many issues with the autofocus on it, so it's been quite good. The body's weather sealed, and the last point is the flip screen, which I love. I've been using this a lot for video, and it's very handy to, look up and down. It can turn right round, and you can also fold it up so that you've got the screen protected. Just to summarize, all those features at the time were quite an impressive package and felt quite ahead of their time, and that's why I went with the camera. And together with the way the body is and the way it handles and feels, it just was a complete package for me. So let's move on to the next point. So looking at this camera, I'll just show you all the different sides so you can get a feel for how it looks. That side there, so there you got your various doors, etc. So for me, it fits pretty well in the hand. I can hold it. I don't have any finger overhanging at the base there. Perhaps for a bigger hand it may be a little bit too small, but for mine it's pretty good. The shutter button is easily accessible. All the controls are easily accessible. I love the fact that you've got all your dials here, and you have an aperture ring on all the lenses so that you can, I think most of the lenses, so you can basically control everything from the top. You've got your ISO, your shutter speed, and your aperture all at your control. You can also change that to on the dials so that you can do it via the scroll wheels rather than having to operate that if that's not your style. The body's weather sealed, as I mentioned, although I haven't tested it too much in the rain. I've usually got an umbrella or something like that so that it hasn't been soaked ever. But it's pretty good if it gets a bit of splash on it, or it hasn't been a problem. I've just wiped it and it's been functional, no issues. It's got a great retro design, so you feel like you've got a vintage camera, even though it's very modern and has a lot of modern features. You can shoot it just like a film camera if you wish. You can close the screen and just use your eyepiece to take 36 pictures. So there's lots of sort of quirky little things on it that make it feel like you've got something from the past, although it's very technologically advanced. One of the other great things is there are a lot of other buttons on here. So for instance, you've got a switch at the front here that changes it from C to S, so your different way of shooting. And you've got, for instance, another little switch here which is a view mode switch, which allows you to change the eyepiece and the screen to work differently. So you can say display only in the eyepiece or only in the LCD or other various options. So it's got quite a lot of customization. You've got a screen here where you can change menus by swiping up, down, to the right and to the left, as well as all those buttons there. And you can program several different things onto here. So there's a wide range of customizations and also a lot of buttons available. Again, coming off other cameras, I found that I was lacking, you had to go through the menus, whereas here everything is right there on board for you to change, so that you don't have to go through menus. You just remember where you're, like for instance, that's another switch that I often use to program something onto. And so, with just one hand you can operate many functions which other cameras don't have. So that was a great feature that I sort of didn't know was there until I started using the camera. Build quality wise, it's been excellent. As you can see, there's very little damage after 4 years. A couple of little, marks here where the hot shoe's been in and out, but other than that, it's been pretty good. A little scratch at the bottom. It's been bags, it's been in cars, it's been traveling, and there's been no drama with it, so I'm very happy with that. Moving on to the ports, so I'll just open up here so you can see on the side. They've come with little doors like this so that the door doesn't actually fall off. It's secured. Let's see if by the little strap there, and that one's the same. Sometimes I wish you could take these off, because if you're at home a lot doing work at home, you're sort of opening and closing that door, and it can be a little bit in the way, especially when you've got the microphone plugged into there. But generally I don't mind the design, because it means you never lose the door. So it's a little bit of a which way do you prefer? Do you prefer to have a door that comes off but you could lose it, or one that doesn't, then it's always there? In terms of the actual ports, I'm just trying to get out of the way so the focus can... so there you've got the ports, you've got the microphone jack. Let me just read them exactly. So that the remote, which I don't really use, and then you've got the HDMI and USB-C in. So USB-C, you can use headphones. There's a little converter that comes with it, so that you plug in your 3.5 into USB-C, and then you can hear through the headphones. A microphone I use all the time. It's great, and there's lots of settings in the microphone where you can specify for the camera to use the preamps in your actual mic instead of using the preamps in the camera, so that you get better audio. And we've got a couple of other ports at the bottom. We've got the vertical battery grip port, which you would put in if you were to mount a battery grip. You've got the sync terminal here, and of course the tripod mount, standard in most cameras. So that's the ports covered. I'll move back to the dual SD cards, which I didn't mention the specs. So the camera can take SD, SDHC and SDXC cards, and it can take both UHS 1 and 2 bus interfaces. So you've got a lot of options there with cards. In terms of lens compatibility, the camera can take various brands. However, I've only got Fuji lenses at the moment, and I've got quite a range which I'm hoping to do some reviews on. So I've got the 23, 35 and 50 f2 primes. I've got a macro, I've got a 55 to 200, the 10 to 24, and I think that's it. I might have missed one. Of course, the standard 18 to 55 that generally comes with the camera. That's also been a great lens, so look out for reviews on those, and leave any comments below as to which other lenses I should be maybe looking at. But yes, in terms of lenses, there's been no issues. Most of them have the aperture ring, if not all. Some of them are stabilized, some of them are not, which is not really a concern for me because the camera has image stabilization. So speaking of that, as I mentioned before, it comes with 5-axis image stabilization. You've got various options as to how you want the image stabilization set up, so you can have boost mode or just normal mode. And one of the big perks of having image stabilization on board is that you don't have to worry about what lenses you're using, whereas if you had the older camera, for instance the X T4, which didn't have image stabilization, you would have to put more consideration into which lens you're putting on if you want some form of stabilization. So that's a bonus. I'll quickly touch on the autofocus. There has been some literature out there and talk about the Fuji X T4 not having a very great run with its autofocus. I tend to think that it's pretty good. I've not really had that many issues. Obviously, every now and then you'll have a glitch, maybe when I move that too close, and that's not an autofocus issue. That's just because I've moved it too close to the lens, where each lens has a certain distance where focus is not able to be pulled. It's from a certain distance. So that's all that's happened there. Most of the time it does a pretty good job, even between my face or a product. It's tracking that well, going back to my face. So yeah, I've not really had many issues. I don't really shoot, fast sports or cars or, that sort of thing. So perhaps if you're that sort of photographer, it may be a bother, but for my general use, I've not had any issues. And in fact, it's been pretty good and pretty reliable, and I rarely get a picture where I've, missed something. So that's my summary on that. Battery wise, it comes with the bigger capacity battery so that you can get pretty good coverage. You get around 400 to 600 photos, depending what mode you shoot on and how you use your camera. But generally, I just take one extra battery with me when I'm out, and I often don't need to put it in to change it over. But there are times when, usually towards the end of the shoot, I just need another, few pictures and it's just on its way out. But generally one battery will do quite the distance, so it's been great. And I've got a dual charger that I use so that I can charge two at a time, and I don't need to use the camera to charge in that instance, which frees up the camera for shooting if I need. So that was a good investment, and I would recommend that. I can do a review on that charger as well. If you're interested, just let me know in the description, in the comments below. Flip screen is next. I mentioned that I really like this feature, mainly because I do videos, so I need to see myself. Every now and then I will glance over there just to see that I'm in focus, or that everything is recording, or that the audio is not peaking, etc. I used to have the X T4, and I did get a little, like a flip up mirror that you can install on the hot shoe that lets you see the image. But this is just much more handy. I don't have to carry an extra accessory. I just put the screen up and I'm ready to record. So it's been great. I also really like that you can flip it out, and then you've got that option of flipping down or up, so you can shoot from above, shoot from below, opposite above and below, I should say. And you can flip it as we've said. And like I mentioned, you've got that security where the screen is nicely protected when you're traveling, which you don't have on the cameras that don't flip. On the downside, on the X T4, you could flip the screen this way, which was quite handy, because often if you're shooting in horizontal mode, you just want to lift it a little bit and you don't want to have to flip it out. So there are some trade-offs. I mean, ideally, if the screen could be, flipped all the way around this way and that way somehow, that'd be awesome. But for me at this stage, that setup is great. But I can see for someone that just does photography, where the older style or different, the X T4, X T5 screens would be more advantageous and easier to use. So it's really up to the type of shooting that you're doing as to which screen would be good. But I've been happy with the X T4 screen. Next we have image quality. Oh, my favorite. I can't say any other words but just to say that it's awesome. I mean, I don't know if I've ever had a photo that I've been unhappy with, even if it's blurry or bad. The colors are beautiful, whether you're shooting in JPEG or RAW. There's just something about the Fuji that I don't know if I could ever get rid of my Fuji camera. Like, I think I'd always have to have one. There's just something about them. They're beautiful colors and just it renders beautifully. On top of that, I want to show you the options that we have with JPEGs. So hopefully, yep, you can see that. And if you can see there on the menus, there's various options that you can, let me just double check. So you've got grain, the chrome effect. And if I flick to the next screen, you can see there's even more options on tone curves and colors and sharpness, etc., etc. So you've got quite a lot of options to choose from just in the JPEG world, and that's not even shooting RAW. So I've made quite a few videos on my YouTube channel a little while ago. If you want to go to the playlist, I'll link it below, where I try out different film recipes. So there's a couple of people on the internet, as well as, of course, you can do it yourself, that they've perfected replicating film. So say Portrait 400, there's certain settings you dial up that will get you close to the look of that, or Ecto or Kodachrome, etc., etc. So I'll put some images up on the screen as well, so you can see the different sort of photos that you can get straight out of camera, as we say in the Fuji world, because there is no editing needed. You can just shoot and the colors will be coming out as you see. Of course, you can shoot RAW and edit them yourself and just ignore all the camera profiles, but you've got that option, and it was really fun. I went through a phase, and I might do it again because I never really did all the recipes, as you call them. But yeah, it's just nice to sort of load film and limit yourself to 24 or 36 exposures and just go out and shoot like as if it was a film camera. And it puts on, the grain, you got the tone curve, you can dial in your white balance and your tint and the various settings that I just showed you on screen to make it look like film. So it's a lot of fun, and highly recommend if you get a Fuji to play around with that, because it just gives you a different way of shooting, and rather than coming back home and editing, it's all ready and ready to have a look at. So that's image quality. It's great. Last point I want to cover is the low light performance of the camera. I've shot at night quite a bit. I've even shot in JPEG, as I mentioned in just the list above, where I've gone out and done different film simulations, and the pictures have been really good. I think the camera excels in low ISO, obviously, but shooting 3200 is no problem in my eyes, and 6400 can be a little bit grainy, but I'll show you some of the photos on screen and you can have a look. To me, they look really good, and I think 6400 is quite acceptable and looks all right. So I haven't had much of an issue. I usually take my f2 primes if I'm shooting at night. I'm looking at getting at 1.4, and that will be quite good, so we can lower the ISO a little bit, but I don't think there's any issues with going to 32, even 64. Above that, you do get a little bit of grain, but I probably wouldn't shoot that high anyway. And the image quality in the Fuji is good enough for me to stay, regardless of the ISO not being able to be pushed as far as other brands. So now we come to the wish list, which I mentioned at the beginning of the video. I've got 3 big wishes for future models of this camera. First one would be to have an inbuilt ND filter. This would be so good, especially for doing video. It does get a little bit annoying having to put the ND on, especially the variable one, because it sort of spins, and then if you've got another filter, it's a bit annoying to sort of have to, spin one when you're not spinning the other, etc. I'm thinking a circular polarizer in this instance, and it just would be so much easier not having to worry about filtration for video, and of course for slow shutter if you want to do that during the day. So that would be, I would just love it to have an internal ND of some sort in there. Second one is, after having used another camera brand which has an option to expose for the highlights, I would love to see that in the Fuji, because it just makes the pictures so good. Like, there's something about them that the range of light from light to dark becomes really interesting when you're exposing just for the highlights. So it never blows out the highlights. The highlight becomes the lightest on the picture, and then things go into black. So you get a lot of like this dark and light, moody look. Great to shoot like during the day when you're getting those shadows on buildings and then someone walks in through the light, that sort of thing. So it'd be a cool feature to have that, where you can just flick it into that mode where it's exposing for the highlights at all times. And lastly, at the back here, we've got let me just flip that screen so we don't get a reflection. At the back here, we've got these buttons where you just press them. Now other brands have a circle that you can just spin. I would love to see that on here. Was one of the frustrations moving over to this camera. If you've ever used that wheel, you know what I mean. You just quickly can spin. You can spin through a roll of what you've shot or through the menus, whereas with this you've got to either hold or click. It might be just a personal preference of mine, but I'd love to see that because I feel it's very efficient, and you've got that extra feature where you can control the speed of things rather than having to wait for buttons. But I've gotten used to it. It's not a major deal, but I would love to see that in a future model. So that's my wish list. Now we'll move on to the conclusion. So yeah, I still love the camera after 4 years. I think it's still a competitive camera. It's got great specs. We haven't really moved that far in the world of, online video and photography to require any more specs. I think 4K is plenty. Most of the time I'm shooting in 1080 anyway. And the specs, all the other little things inside the camera and all the menus and options and buttons are great. And I think it's very competitive still in the market today. I also think it's a great camera for a hybrid shooter that requires photo and video. It's an all-rounder, it's all in one, and you can easily shoot professional videos and photos with this camera, even 4 years on from its release date. And finally, would I sell it in 2024? I don't see myself selling it at this stage. I do think about upgrading, but my main reason for the upgrade is the fact that the warranty has run out of the cameras on this camera and the other one. I've got 2 of them. So I have to sort of balance, if something goes wrong, how much will that be? And is it worth spending that money up front now, selling this and buying a newer one so that I'm covered by, I believe it's 3 years warranty. So that's my biggest consideration. I would be selling it mainly to cover myself for any issues going forward. In saying that, nothing has gone wrong with either of them, and it may be that way for years to come. So a bit of a hard decision. Watch this space. Yes, one of the things is the X-T5, the screen has changed, so it's holding me back a little bit on moving up that way. Perhaps the XH2 range would be more fitting. I don't know, but then it's bigger. So yeah, a little bit of a debate there. Maybe I'll make a video on it so you guys can give me a little bit of advice on your end as to what you think I should do. But for this stage, I'm sticking with the X-T4 and still very happy, but we'll see what the future brings. Thanks so much for watching this video. Hope it wasn't too long. Hope you got some information out of it, and let's chat in the comments, and I'll see you soon in the next one. Bye.